American population is currently 32,167,414. African Americans make up approximately 13.4% of that population. However, in the correctional population, they make up 34%. Contrastingly with New Zealand, we have 4,705,818. Māori make up around 15.6% of that population. However, in our correctional population, we have around 50.6%. Now you'll see in the spike on the graph that around this time, between 1930s to 2000, that was when the English government started to introduce Māori into European populations, into their society where they were alienating from a Māori society to a more English-dominated society.
Colonisation by the British of New Zealand first officially occurred in 1840 with the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. In English, this document stated that the Māori chiefs granted the Queen of England full sovereignty. However, in Te Reo, it only stated that they granted her rangatiratanga, that is, chieftainship. After the signing, English settlers proceeded to ignore the rights of Māori. Over the next several decades, a number of brutal wars were fought between the groups. Improvements to race relations have been made in the recent decades, especially regarding the Waitangi Tribunal, which allows Māori to have their settlement claims heard. However, the conflicts haven't been fully resolved.
New Zealand lawyer Moana Jackson speaks much about the issue of unequal, inequitable and unjust incarceration of Māori in his 1988 report He Whai Paunga Hou. In it, he highlights how Māori have largely been unapproached and their input largely ignored in regards to disproportionate incarceration and the justice system, which is an issue that affects Māori more than any other cultural group. He says, "There is an assumption which has reflected the New Zealand belief that non-Pākehā people must integrate into the existing framework of Pākehā society and adopt its prevailing cultural mores. With this underlying belief, research has tended to view various behaviours as indicators of the relative success of the integration process." This point that Moana Jackson brings up would of course cause statistics to be slanted in that the topics that are chosen for research and given funding by the government would mostly be tied to crime that the majority Pākehā population view as pertinent. As Jackson puts it, the Māori crime rate may be interpreted to some extent as a social barometer of Pākehā priorities. The social history and cultural values of Māori, therefore, must be accounted for in order to get a real picture of the causes of crime committed by Māori, and how to work on fixing the root causes of these issues. This requires a willingness on the part of the majority Tauiwi public to change their effective approach to communicating with Māori people. This is better summed up by Moana Jackson. No members of a culture can be understood in isolation from the cultural forces which shape them, and no culture can be understood unless account is taken of the attitudes, expectations, beliefs, and values on which it is based.
Language and cultural communication is one of the major factors which causes incarceration of Māori people. Following the New Zealand Wars, the Native Schools Act was started in 1867. Māori were required to donate land for the school, also contribute to the costs of the building and the teacher's salary. In the following year, English became the official language of the nation. Thus, Pākehā enjoyed the priority in both educational and political areas. Ethnocentrism of Pākehā community brought an unequal treatment to Māori people, therefore led to the loss of Māori language and cultural knowledge. At that time, many Māori people left school because their attitudes against the use of English and wished to protect their culture by leaving the schools. The low level of education generated a barrier between Māori and Pākehā communities and caused low economic development in Māori society. The socio-economic conditions result in higher incarceration rates of the community because they don't have enough money to live nor to be educated. However, as the public is more willing to accept Māori language and culture in recent years, Māori people can contribute in New Zealand's political and economic areas.
Josephine mentioned socioeconomic status. Research shows that Māori earn up to $6,000 less on average per year than people who classified themselves as New Zealanders. And, as we can see on this graph, in areas with the most economic deprivation, Māori population rapidly increases. As a result of the lack of intercultural communication during the early formation of modern New Zealand, many Māori are still feeling the effects of economic pressure forced upon iwi and hapu. Research also shows a strong link between lower socioeconomic status and imprisonment. The law applies equally to everyone, but naturally those who are disadvantaged by the system will have a greater risk of A, committing a crime, and B, consequently being incarcerated.
Family violence is another large contributor to Māori incarceration. 46% of total children with physical abuse are Māori. 55% of total children with emotional abuse are Māori. 53% of total children with neglect are Māori. Statistics show 71% of admissions to youth justice with a family violence background are Māori. Family violence has a huge impact on childhood development, and a shift would be paramount for a healthy development. Replacing negative and regressive values with love, empathy, and understanding would help form a really healthy childhood. However, with the negative and really regressive values such as control, reactive thoughts on violent behaviour as a form of dominance and reaction, show there's no form of emotion and there's lacking empathy. The thought of no one cares about me, so why should I care about anyone else, as described by Nigel Latta, is incredibly prevalent and most serious offensive, as the lack of compassion, empathy and understanding is very dangerous for erratic and senseless behaviour. 76% of family violence cases are not reported, leading to more vulnerable and exclusion from limited to no help. The government has recently passed the Family Violence Act and the Family Violence Amendments Act, which will now take place on July 1st of 2019. The COCA, the Care of Children Act, hasn't been updated and primarily focuses on custody of children involved. What needs to happen is more psychological assessments to ensure children are fit enough to move into new homes and ensure that once in a new home, the child feels safe and is developing healthily and not regressing into a worsened state. An increase in communication is required, both between government and Māori, and those who's in the in-group has a stronger influence to address issues as it affects a disproportionate amount of Māori. The link between family violence and incarceration rates are too high to be ignored, and the underlying cultural alienation that leads to situations like these needs to be addressed.